data portal for the past years, and I have been part of the European data portal team. And specifically, I am responsible for the support to the European member states, and also leading the research on open data maturity, specifically the 2020 edition, which we together with a team conducted this year. And the results of the research have already been presented to the member states in December, and also the report and all of the supporting materials have been published last December, just before the Christmas break. And today I'm just happy to give you some insights into the, let's say, the main trends of the report that were concluded from the assessment, and also to answer some of the questions you, Ray, Elina, and the audience may have. Well, at least to the best of my ability, of course. Yeah, how about I just give a quick introduction of the assessment itself?
Sure, I think that would be good.
Yeah. Okay, so as hopefully most of you know, we, or the European Data Portal, performs an annual assessment of the efforts that are taken at national level to open up data for the public in order to, in the end, reuse it. And opening up data, of course, enables public bodies, but also academic researchers, entrepreneurs, data scientists, developers, to do something useful with that data that will in the end lead to more efficient processes and decision making in the public sector, but also better research or new products and services that are developed based on open data. And so the European Data Portal's open data maturity research really is a benchmark on the state of play in the field of open data across Europe. And I can also briefly describe the setup of the research. So what we do, we assess each country on several different dimensions of open data maturity. And we do this via a self-assessment of, which is done through a pretty major questionnaire, which is filled out by country representatives, which are often a dedicated open data team within a ministry that focuses on digital development, so a Ministry of Digital Affairs, something like that. And each of these 4 dimensions consists of subdimensions or indicators, which are scored, and then together the scores of each of the subdimensions compile the score of the dimension, and each of the 4 scores of the dimensions compile the open data maturity score. And these 4 dimensions are, first of all, open data policy. So is there a national policy on open data in place? Is there a dedicated strategy in place and made actionable with an implementation plan? Is there a governance system in place, etc.? Then the second dimension is open data impact. And this is really focused on the extent to which there are monitoring measures in place to assess the impact that is created by open data and how it helps to create benefits for society. And that is focused on different areas. So you can think of political impact, social impact, environmental impact, etc. Then the third one is open data portal, which is really focused on how is the data made easily findable through a portal, and does that portal really offer more extensive functionalities, and is it user friendly? Does it enable interaction between data providers and reusers in order to create better quality data? And the final and also a very important one is the fourth one, which is open data quality. So it's not just about the amount of data that is available, but the data should be of good quality and able to ensure that people can reuse it in a proper way. And this is really focused on if there are mechanisms in place to ensure good quality metadata, so the data that is describing the data, and also to some extent some checks of the quality of the data itself. So I think that gives an overview of the assessment that we do, how the different components are interlinked, and how we come up with the open data score itself.
Thank you for that. Could you maybe tell us a bit more about how the quality of the data is measured? So yes. You just mentioned it's, for one thing, the existence of metadata, and if that is provided and is of good quality, but then also the quality of the data itself. Also tying into one of the questions from the audience, how do you assess that? Can you guarantee that?
Yeah, so basically looking into the quality dimension, we have 4 sub-indicators for that. So we're looking at these monitoring measures. We also look, secondly, to the currency of the data, and with that we mean how up to date is the data, because often data sets are uploaded once and then never maintained. So we try to reward higher scores to those national portals that have some checks and balances in place that ensure that metadata and data is made up to date and is as complete as possible. So for example, when you have data that is collected annually, that means that from the moment they started collecting it until 2020 is included in the data, or if it's monthly, that it's included up until December. Yeah, also up until December 2020. Then thirdly, we look into data.AP compliance, so the extent to which all of the metadata is compliant with that standard, which is set at a European level. And then let's say the quality of the deployment, so the extent to which data is published in an open format, if it's machine readable, if it uses unique resource identifiers, and if it's also published as linked data. And these steps also build towards a better quality of the data that we are looking for. So depending on how well a country performs on those indicators, they will get a higher score.
Okay, makes sense.
I have a question regarding the quality as well, and how is it that potentially we as the European Data Portal, or how can member states continue to improve the quality of the data going forward? What are they missing to properly maintain the data, or is there something in the framework, or is there something that can be done that will help them reach not a higher score, but just a higher quality in general, if that makes sense?
Yes, well, I would say that's I'm not sure to what extent the assessment itself really can play a role in that. I mean, the assessment, of course, gives insight in the current state of how we would assess quality of data. And I think to really improve that, that's up to the national data itself, of course. And the results of the assessment give them some indication of where to focus on and what are the improvement areas for them. And then I would say there are various ways in which they can start developing that. For example, also the European Data Portal itself provides support on improving data quality through trainings and through material that is available, but that's also often the case in the national portals itself, so they can provide additional support to the data providers in terms of guidelines and other information that will help them create better quality data.
Thank
I don't
you.
know if that answers your question.
A bit. I was also wanted to see if, based on the responses you got, what did you notice was, or if you noticed if something was consistently missing for those who scored lower in quality. If there was something that the countries who scored higher had that the others did not.
I would say that that's mostly relies, is reflected in the extent to which there are regular checks. So if there's monitoring mechanisms in place at the national level, if they have that, they are much more likely, countries are much more likely to indicate and give feedback to the data providers on the quality of their data, and in that way improve the quality of the data. Countries that don't have that monitoring mechanism in place, it of course is much more difficult for them to make an assessment of a lack of quality and how to improve it and give feedback to the data providers in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
There is a question from Magnus in the audience. Please go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
So I was listening yesterday also on a session about European Data Portal, and measuring is so important. But I think if you don't have schemas telling the participants that this is the data set you should deliver and this should be in the schemas, you don't measure so much. If you take the vaccination data, which I am so dedicated to now, we can see that we have one vaccination and you need to have a second one. And now they start asking for that type of data. If they don't deliver both, then it's not good enough. Mm-hmm. So having schemas telling this is the data set you should deliver and this is the content, and in this field that is vaccination, you need to have linked data. Then you get this guidance to people saying that you are not getting good scores because you don't have that. Now it's so vague that you don't deliver. I think most people I speak with about open data, they are not rocket scientists. And they need someone telling you. For example, the Swedish government now about vaccination, they put it on a web page, yes, the data, and it's a mess. Mm-hmm. So we need to be more precise. Maybe those 10 data sets is what you should deliver. If you don't have it, you are on score 0. If you have that, we need, I can see, I've been, sorry speaking so much, but I've been looking into Europeana, who started 2012 with linked data, maybe doing linked data, and they have nothing today because people could upload text strings. So the quality is so bad, so even Wikipedia don't want to link them because they don't know who is the artist. So I think we need to be more precise. It's so easy to upload data now. You can do it on Facebook and every places, but doing good quality data, you need much better guidance and much more dialogue, because it's not easy to understand what they should deliver. What version of the vaccination do you have in France, in the Netherlands, and so on? Sorry.
That's okay. That's no. I'm just thinking on. Yeah, if I can think of certain countries that we saw from the European from the assessment that already do that could play as an example for that. And I believe that for the National Data Portal of France is pretty developed in that. They have very extensive guidelines and also schema, what do you call it? The schemas that the data providers should be using, and I think that in that regard, France could be a good example for other national portals to also start with giving their providers that guidance that they need to improve the quality of the data, and not just by giving them guidelines and text that they can look up, but also indeed what you're mentioning. And I think that's a very important one, and we see especially in the more mature countries from the assessment, is that this interaction, the dialogue, facilitation between data providers and reusers is so important. And yeah, I think that's one of the big learnings that less mature countries can learn from the more mature countries, such as France, such as Spain, Denmark, etc.
Now that we touch upon it briefly, Laura, you mentioned the French example. Could you maybe tell us a bit more about the results of the report in general and how countries did and what the developments are that you've seen?
Yes, of course. So more on the results side of things. This year, the European countries really showed a great increase in the levels of their maturity, and this was really across all of the 4 maturity dimensions. So let's say the average score is 78%, which is an increase of 12 percentage points compared to 2019. So we really see a big increase this year, and this also resulted in a higher concentration of countries at the higher end of the results spectrum. And we also cluster the participating countries in depending on their score, and we saw that the highest cluster, so what we call the trendsetter cluster, this year consists of 7 countries, while last year there was only 3 countries. So these are, like I said, Ireland, Spain, and France. They retained their trendsetter position from last year. And the group is really extended with Denmark as the new frontrunner, Estonia, Poland, and Austria as the countries that we can learn a lot from. And in terms of more the trends, that basically is already one of them, that we really saw this peak performance this year. And we also believe that it is in part due to the year 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic that characterized 2020, because it really emphasized the genuine need for data. And how do you say that?
Do you see that they're reflected in more health data, for example, or just a general feeling of countries being able to share data and more of a practice, or is it really focused on specific data?
I would say it's a combination of both, because the pandemic also really brought about this renewed emphasis on the importance of systematically collecting and making data available to the public due to the crisis, and also the need to respond to the emergency led many countries to start publishing health-related data or even some sort of other types of related data, and also starting developing new initiatives and dashboards to make this data more easily understandable and insightful. And there are really many examples of that in many different countries. From the top of my head, the work that was done in teams from Slovenia, for example, but also Italy, who was really fast in creating this new kind of dashboard and all the information related to the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, because they were one of the countries that were hit hardest and one of the earliest, of course. And also France again. And I also believe that the France team will be joining one of these data talks soon to go into more detail of what they've done during the pandemic.
Yes, we have a data talks coming up with them indeed. Yeah.
Good too.
Also the Italian portal as well.
Yeah, exactly.
The next 2, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe, and it's not really about what I believe, but what many countries indicated to us is that the pandemic really stirred up developments on pandemic-related data, which I'm in a way happy about, well, of course not happy about the pandemic, but good to see such a fitting response to such a horrible situation with data.
Yeah, it's nice to see such a huge endeavor by countries being undertaken in response to this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was, I believe, one of the main trends. The second trend really is also about quality. So I'm also happy that a lot of people indicated to have some questions about that. So what we saw is that as the open data propositions of many of the European countries are maturing, their focus has also really moved from the quantity of data being made available to ensuring its quality too. And moreover, quality is not really seen as a thing of its own, but also as an enabler for interoperability. So enabling how do you say that? The ability to collaborate with the countries and across borders, making it easier for systems to exchange the data. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good step forward that we see in the more mature countries. And then the third and the final trend that I would go into is really from moving from just publishing data to looking at what is the impact that is created by it. And with that also comes that as the next step to start thinking about how to systematically measure the impact, because generating a positive impact on society, of course, is one of the key drivers behind publishing open data, and we see in many countries that measuring the impact is really still a very complex task, and there is still really no shared understanding on how to do it best. Mm-hmm. Some countries really have started to start very the very first steps in this process by trying to look into how can we showcase reuse cases and engage more with communities to get a better sense of, okay, how is data used and how is it creating impact. And this is also something that we would like to focus on more in the upcoming years. Mm-hmm. So those are
this document provides a standard and a benchmark for countries to compare themselves on, right? And then also ensure that you're talking about the same stuff basically, because you're aware of what other countries are doing. So this is a step forward, I guess.
Yeah, that's what we hope. That's
yeah, exactly. Eline, there's a question from you. Go ahead.
Yes, also linking directly to what you said, do you have advice for anyone who wants to measure their country or their organization's open data maturity level? How they would go about doing that?
Well, I would say for the countries, they can look at, of course, the maturity reports insofar as the European countries go, but also all of the materials that we used. So the assessments, the questions and the scoring behind it, those are all published. So these are free for anyone to use to their advantage as well.
Thank you. And another follow-up question from me is, going forward into not post-COVID, but after the roller coaster that we experienced last year, and as you said, the emergence of more data and the shift towards quality, what do you foresee or hypothesize for the future of open data maturity assessment in Europe?
I'm sorry, what you're asking me, like, what would my outlook be?
What's your outlook? What trends do you expect or hope to see going forward now?
I would say I was quite happy with some of the trends that we already identified. And yeah, I believe that's the for me, what I would really like to see is this engagement to take that to the next level, and not just in a few countries, but in as many countries as possible, because I think that's where a lot of value lies. So to have close interaction between publishers, reusers, and the national teams to get a better sense of what data is needed and how it can best be published to fit the needs of the reusers. But also looking more into the let's say the identification of the high value data sets and high priority domains to make sure that that's where the focus lies, instead of a more scattered distribution of efforts. I would like to have more countries having a clear focus, a clear strategy, and a clear point that they want to get through collaboration between these groups, but also through collaboration between different countries, so that more countries can start learning from each other. And I hope that that's also one of the ways in which this report can play a role.
Thank you. And with that, I also hand over to Agnieszka, who also has a question.
Yes.
Yes, hello. I would like to come back for a while to the aspect of the impact of open data. As we know, it's one of the, let's say, most difficult aspects. So my question is, if you noticed, if any of the countries try to develop a comprehensive way to measure the impact, because the collection of examples of applications, use cases, etc., we know since years. However, it is more on, let's say, anecdotic level, just showing some examples, but not really measuring the impact. Yes, so
yes.
My question is, if there is already progress in this domain, let's say, trying really to measure the impact in any of the countries.
Yes. Yes, like I said, that's still something that's quite complex, and we do see a nice trend of countries taking further steps and being aware of the way that they're doing it, have been doing it up until now, is not ideal. Like you said, collecting reuse cases, monitoring the number of downloads, which is still a proxy that doesn't tell you too much. But we see that, for example, the Netherlands, Ireland, and France have started some sort of collaboration together to share their efforts and think along with each other on a measurement that works for them. So we do see some countries taking the lead in that, which I think is very, very good. And the European Data Portal itself is also involved in those discussions.
Can you give some examples of the measurements, if you are aware of it? Let's say what they already consider as additional way of measuring, apart from, let's say, the portal usage, the standard metrics that we are using.
I don't know that's very in detail yet. These conversations have just started to develop. I believe there have been early conversations, and it's planned for this year to continue those conversations and start the development. But I believe it's still quite in the early phases of development. So
okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
So I'm hoping to give you a better answer, let's say somewhere in the upcoming year.
Okay, thanks a lot. Maybe I can ask also another question related to high-value datasets. So there is an ongoing discussion on the level of the Commission, let's say, to establish a list of high-value datasets. Have you noticed already some preparation in this respect in member states, like anticipating, let's say, possible obligation of publishing? We already know the categories, so I imagine that some member states maybe already took some proactive steps in this domain.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We have included that also in the questionnaire, asking countries to what extent they have been preparing for the high value data sets, and we actually saw a lot of member states that have started that process. Some countries already have a clear view of the specific data sets that are identified. So we do see quite a good development in that regard. I don't know the numbers by heart, but I believe the percentage of member states that have started identification of high value data sets pretty high.
Okay. So this aspect is also covered by the report, because I didn't have the opportunity to read it in details yet.
Yes, although it's a small part of it, but it is included. We unfortunately didn't have the level of detail that we really have all of the data sets that have been identified included in the report, but I believe that's something definitely, at least for next year, we can we should be able to include.
Okay, thank you. I think it could be a great topic, let's say, for possible collaboration or like learning from each other, at least for member states, so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And it will be a formal obligation, so it is important, let's say, to help them perhaps to move forward with this topic.
Yes, I agree. Thanks for your question, Agnieszka.
Maybe as a follow-up question to that, Laura, do you have any recommendations for countries that are on the basis of their position? So let's say they're scoring a relatively low in terms of open data maturity now. What should they do to improve and get into that in that higher segment and higher ratings? Oh, you're muted, Laura.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I would say definitely we have very extensive recommendations for the countries that are okay. Like I said, the countries are clustered, and for each of the clusters, we have quite extensive recommendations at the end of the report, and I can give you a very brief insight or overview of those. I would say for the first cluster, so the beginners clusters, what we would recommend to them is to really start with the basics. So start rallying support to an open data program, and in terms of more political leadership, and use the materials that are already available, such as this open data maturity report or the report on open data impact, to really emphasize the importance and the economic and societal benefits of data exploitation. And I would also say start with identifying main data stakeholders in your country and start setting up a national team to coordinate the activities and develop a national strategy for open data as the basis. Then we have the second cluster, which is the open data followers. And for those countries, it would be necessary to start. Often they already have a national strategy, but they should be updated to also reflect the policy and other technical developments at EU level, such as the requirements that we just talked about of the latest Open Data Directive, and also identifying high-value data sets and other priority domains. Other than that, setting up a governance structure and a network of open data liaison offices, so within different parts of the public administration, and also to continue developing these national portals and start setting up engagement activities. Then the third cluster, the fast trackers, for them it would be good to update the portal to also allow for better engagement even with the audience, also to promote and follow up on the performance of the products and services that are built on open data. So to have showcases of reuse examples, etc. And really develop this strategic awareness also on the reuse and the impact. I would say for the last cluster, or the first cluster, depending on how you look at it. So the trendsetters, the ones that are already really mature in their open data practices, it's a matter of enhancing and consolidating the open data ecosystem that they have been developing.
Because these are countries that already score high in terms of quality and engagement and portals. So across all domains, these countries are doing well, let's say.
Yes, yes. So these are the ones that are already the example for other countries, but even they can still improve, I would say. So yeah, besides consolidating the activities that they already have been doing, it's also about further engagement with the communities. Mm-hmm. And this could be done by creating sort of thematic communities of data providers and reusers. So on a certain theme, let's say traffic or health, it would be good to create some sort of communities of practice around those themes. And also really to communicate and collaborate with other national open data teams, but also universities, research institutions, and also potentially us, the European Data Portal, to really start assessing the impact of open data and set up, like I mentioned, which is already going on between the Netherlands, Ireland, and France, some sort of experimental groups that can start developing an impact assessment framework. Because I think that's something that would really help all of the countries to have a better understanding of what impact is created and how to monitor that better. And I would say those are the recommendations for each of the clusters in order to really get to the point that we all want the countries to be at. Mm-hmm. And I really hope that the report and all of the examples that are included in it and some of the best practices from the countries can really inspire national open data teams or anyone for that matter to foster increasing the availability and quality of open data and reuse. And yes, I hope that's enabling them to learn from each other this report and to spark initiatives for further collaboration.
Yeah, and we have another report coming up next year where we can evaluate that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Mindful of time, I think time for one last question. Agnieszka, go ahead.
Yes, maybe to continue on this aspect of engagement. We agree with you that it is crucial, and it's not only for the evaluation of the impact, but also for the improvement of quality.
Absolutely.
So it is indeed very important, but it requires a lot of resources. And in most of the cases, I think there are usually few people working on open data. So there is always this, dilemma. What do we really focus on, and which activity will bring us the biggest added value? And we also have the impression that perhaps some of the things could be done in good collaboration with research community or with NGOs or people who are engaged, the users community, etc. So my question is, if you noticed in any of the countries a good model for this sort of collaboration, sort of, let's say, help from reusers communities, from, let's say, from academics, etc., that could be also perhaps showed as a benchmark or an example to follow, good practice, etc.
Yes, yeah, and I absolutely agree with all the things that you just mentioned. I would say from the top of my head, I believe that Ireland is doing quite well in that regard, also in setting up these thematic communities that I was talking about, and that also involves collaborations with many different types of stakeholders. And I believe also Cyprus could be a good example of that, as I know that they are having a lot of interactions with research institutions and universities to work together on different topics and really collaborate in that way. So I would say those two countries are, just from the top of my head, good examples that showcase that it is possible, and it's also an effective and efficient way of collaborating on the topics.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Yeah, I think it's time for us to close off. Laura, I would like to thank you for being here today and talking about the Open Data Maturity Reports. And also, I would like to thank the audience for attending and asking questions. The recording of the session will be on YouTube, and we will promote it through our social media channels, so stay tuned for that. And if nothing else, I would like to wish you all a happy working day, and thank you again, Laura.